Awesome. Victoria Smith,
Hello.
the Tantric Witch.
Mm, back again.
Back again. Yes. Thank you very much for coming back on the show.
It's an honor.
Yeah. I know that this might be a very, very challenging episode. Because we're going to be talking about rape. And, now I'm a guy, and I've been lucky enough to not have experienced anything like this. Although I know quite a few men and women who have experienced rape, especially some people in my family, very close. Uh, and those people protected me to make sure that I didn't encounter anything like that when I was growing up. So I'm going to ask you questions from my perspective because I've got my perspective, and I really want to understand, because it's not something that I do understand experientially. So I think I'm just going to leave it to you to sort of say what your story is and what perspective you have on this topic, because I think, especially with the Me Too movement going on right now, and a lot of the discourse online, I think your message is something that really needs to be shared, because I see you as a very powerful woman. Yeah, and I think that your message is something that needs to be shared. So. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experiences were, and yeah, I guess start off with the things that you wanted to say. I'll just leave it there. Not a very specific question, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot to be said on the topic of rape and how it's a huge problem in our society, for women especially, like you said, with the Me Too campaign. And I think there's a lot of people telling women how to handle this and how to go about doing this. And that's something I definitely want to steer away from in this conversation and in my life. But I guess I do want to share like my perspective on what's happened for me and how I have coached clients in my past and what's come up for them and what's worked for them. And so yeah, a lot about what I do is working with like sexual trauma, sexual dysfunction, and pleasure expansion. And a lot of women that come to me, they have all these different things that have happened to them and how it's affecting them in their everyday life. And even today, like I was raped by a stranger in the past, and also by a partner. And so there's two very different ways of being raped, basically, and how they can affect you. And then also there's a scale of this, like having your boundaries pushed as well. So like even today, maybe there is like times when I connect with certain men and I maybe haven't asserted my boundaries, or I'm a little bit out of my depth. So for instance, like if I'm wanting to surrender to a person, I feel like I really know them well, and something might happen and I just feel like, oh, they didn't read me then, and I need to assert my boundaries, and maybe I'm too caught up in the moment and I'm not asserting exactly what I want. And this is something that's been coming up for a lot of women, I think. So there's like a scale of like things that can happen to you that make you feel a little bit violated, basically. And there's definitely like this space between when I'm connecting with a man and I feel like, oh, actually I haven't stated my boundaries there, that I feel a little bit jarred by the connection. So usually what happens after that is that the next day or something, I feel like, oh, there's like this uneasiness in me, that my body feels like it wasn't honored, or I didn't honor myself and my boundaries. And I really have to do work on that often. So like I say, if that happens, then I'll just be with that feeling, and I won't try to amplify it, or I won't try to minimize it either. And this is actually what I usually invite people to do when they are coping with rape, because I'm finding that myself included, and women that I work with, they either feel like this really intense victim mentality where this rape consumes them, and it becomes everything about their character, and they relive this trauma every day, and it's really hard for them, and it's really hard for them to cope with. And it's almost like they're looking for like a healing solution that will take the pain away and will take this feeling of victimization away from them. And then I see women on the other end of the scale where they completely minimize what's happened to them. They just say, oh, you know, well, this happened, but it's not as bad as what's happened to every other woman. And, you know, it was like a little bit like it was partly my fault, or, you know, there's these stories that come around where they minimize it and they don't deal with it on a day-to-day basis, and they maybe never deal with it. And I find both these ways end up coming to some sort of like discomfort in everyday life. Basically, it starts to leak through the cracks eventually, if whatever way you decide to deal with it. And what I've been encouraging, well, what I've been through myself and what I encourage my clients to do is to just have an acceptance of what's happening. And I find ways to guide them through this acceptance. So people that are like feeling like this really intense victimization and feeling the weight of the world and the weight of like the collective like feelings that women experience through rape, I invite them to view it as almost like a part of the pie in a way. So like, you know, it's often to make this a little bit more easier to understand, when I do self-pleasuring or like in a workshop space or with women that in my space, is that I invite them to just see whatever part of whatever emotions they're feeling as just a part of like a bigger circle. So not basically, instead of just saying like I am just completely a victim in this space, it's just like honoring that part that feels like they have been victimized, and almost putting a container around that and just like being with that in that moment. And this kind of wraps around to what I was saying about when I am with a man and I feel like I've overstepped my boundaries and I need to reconnect with myself. I come down to that mat and I just be with that part of myself that feels jarred by the connection. And I just honor and put a container around that part of me that feels that way. And I just sit with that and I just move into that. And I think like, what does that feel like in my body, and how does it need to be moved, and how can I like integrate with it? So often it's not about releasing the pain and releasing and transforming the pain. It's actually just about how to integrate with it. How can I sit with it in this moment in time and just accept it? Because often it's not possible just to transform our pain and our like darker emotions. They're very real and they need to be sat with rather than transformed a lot of the time. And this is like part of what, like, you know, the issue in our society is like, we're almost like, right, how can I find this pill that I'm going to take that's going to transform this emotion, and I'm not going to feel like this victim that's been raped anymore? And I just don't think that's possible. So what I want to do is help women integrate with that feeling and allow it to become part of them. Because what has happened to me is that I've allowed everything that's happened to me to become a part of me, and seen how it's actually for the greater good and it's how it's transformed my life basically. So everything that's happened to me has made me the person I am today, the good, the bad, the uncomfortable, all of it. And I appreciate everything about me, and I can sit with any part of that anytime. Like I said to you before we started this conversation, I'm very happy to talk about any of those parts of my life, and I feel very comfortable with it. It's not because I have full acceptance of what's happened in a way. It's just that I'm okay with everything that's happened. Like I'm okay with that part of me that feels like I have been victimized, and because I'm a woman, that's happened to me. You know, there is those parts that come up in my mind, of course. But I think it's important just to be with them rather than try to transform them.
Yeah, there was a lot to talk about in there. So I guess I'll start off with trying to put myself into your shoes. When like sort of like understanding that, like feeling that unease in your body, if you had said that to me, you know, 8 years ago, I would have had no idea what you were talking about. I would have been like, what are you talking about? Some unease and your boundaries weren't, like, what are you talking about? And then I worked at a gay bar for a few months, and and that's when I really actually understood, because I had a bunch of guys like grab my ass and get like really close, and there's almost like this look in their eyes, and there is actually kind of an energy that's really felt. I'm like, wow, I feel like you're penetrating me with just an intention, and just it's very creepy, and it feels it's kind of hard to put into words, but when you say that feeling, that unease in your body, on some level I can relate to it, even if it's just the tip of the iceberg. I can understand, because I have had some experiences like that. I've also had a lot of guys that approached me when I was working there, and it felt very honorable, and it felt very honoring, and it felt very respectful. And it's like, wow, I think I'm pretty. Thanks. And yeah, so it was. In that sense, I can definitely relate. When you're, I'm having a challenge of figuring out where to go. I mean, you had mentioned so much. I mean, I guess I'll start off from the beginning. Actually, I'm gonna ask this question first. Do you see yourself as a victim?
I don't feel that anymore. I think this is what's been the journey for me, is like sitting with that space that is the victim, and integrating it so much that it doesn't need to be integrated anymore. So moving that energy, and just sitting with the energy and feeling that energy in my body, and allowing it to become so much of a part of me that I don't need to integrate it anymore. So there's no like step of integration anymore. And now it is just a part of me, and it's a comfortable part of me now, and it's not uncomfortable anymore. So I don't feel like a victim, no.
So you would say that if you're still carrying the trauma, then you still are a victim. So as long as you're carrying a very charged emotion to what happened to you in the past, then that would mean that you still are a victim because you're carrying it. Is that essentially it?
I guess I don't really see. I don't like. It's just a little like pick on the words a little bit of. Are you a victim? It's like, I feel like this victim feeling is like, it's like almost putting you as a character. It's like, to change the words a little bit, right? Say like when I encourage women to do self-pleasure, I say, sit with that part of yourself that feels needy. And it brings so much discomfort in people's bodies to say, oh, there's a part of me that's needy, right? Because it's an uncomfortable feeling to feel needy. But what it is like, if I said you are a needy person, you might think, oh gosh, no, I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to be that way. But if I said, oh, there's this part of you that feels needy, it's just like a little bit more comfortable to sit with, right? Because I'm not paid possibly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what I'm doing is I'm not making that neediness your character. I'm just making it a part of your energy in that moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're not identifying with being a victim, and I think some people do go in that way. They say I am a victim, and I was raped, or I was assaulted, or whatever, and they get caught up in the I am a victim. And some people will say, well, no, you were a victim, but now you're just living in this victim mindset. And I guess what you're suggesting is it is something kind of in between, where there's a part of you that is still feeling like a victim, but that's only part of who you are, and it doesn't make sense to identify with only one aspect of who you are, because it's just one part, and to look at yourself as more complex than that. And that's essentially what you're saying, right?
I guess what I believe is that as humans, we have the capacity to feel every emotion and everything that you can feel. And I might not be feeling like a victim today, but something might happen to me tomorrow. Maybe I get raped again. Maybe a man oversteps my boundaries, or something like that happens. And I might be forced to deal with all the other times that I felt like a victim in my life. And then that victim energy might sit in my aura again. And I might have to integrate that again. So I guess the healing process is not for me like, all right, so now I'm not a victim anymore because I've sat with that part of me and I've healed it. Like, I don't believe that's how it works. It's almost like every time we pass that part of ourselves on the little journey of like, oh, there's something that's happened, I feel jarred again, and now I feel like there's that bit part of me that's visiting all that times that I felt like a victim. It's just like seeing it with new eyes every time you pass it, basically. So it just keeps like, that's how life is. We just keep circling around these emotions, and like, you know, every time you feel sadness, it connects to all the other times in your life that you felt sadness, and anger's the same, and happiness is the same. And it's like, as humans, we relate one emotion to all the other times that we felt the emotion. So right today, no, there is nothing in my psyche that feels like a victim. But that's not to say that if something happened to me, I couldn't go back into that feeling, that space again, and having to work with integrating it.
So when you say integrating, would you mean that you're basically just accepting, all you're doing is just accepting that you have those feelings in that moment?
Yeah, and just being with them.
Not denying it, not minimizing, and not identifying with them.
Exactly. We're not identifying, we're not amplifying, we're not minimizing. It's all just, like acceptance of just oneness with that emotion.
It's very Vipassana.
Yeah, it is a little.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember when we had our conversation the last time, we continued chatting for quite a while after our last call. And I remember you saying that you actually felt a lot more powerful as a result of those situations. That was one thing that you had said. There's another thing that you had said as well that I'm really looking forward to bringing up as well, because I think it flips the script a little bit. But am I right in my memory that you came out feeling much more powerful as a result of those experiences?
Yeah, I do feel more powerful today than I've ever felt in my life. I feel more powerful today than I felt before these things happened to me.
And how is it that you can turn that around? Or did you have to turn it around in the first place? Or did you just feel that way after it happened?
It's not like it happened and then I feel better for it. Of course, it's that I just feel that it is a very powerful thing to do, to be able to grow so much that you can sit with these emotions. Like I did Vipassana, and I did a lot of the other, meditations and stuff around like being with your emotions and stuff like that. And a lot of the time I found it very infuriating to sit with my emotions and to do all that stuff. And honestly, even when I'm listening to myself, I'm like, oh God, like this is not relatable. Like how can, like, this is like, when you're in the depths of that horrible uncomfortableness, someone saying, oh, just be with it, just be with your anger, just be with your sadness, just be with that part of yourself. That's actually infuriating. And that actually really annoys me.
Yeah, it is very angering.
Yeah, and seeing how calm I am today, of course, that if I was watching this, I would feel infuriated if I was feeling those feelings. So it's almost like there is a lot of ways that there's a lot of reasons why I feel able to feel more powerful. And I think what it is if I try to explain it in energy, is like, here's like the peak of my pain and my anger and my sadness, and that part of me that's a victim because I've been raped. And here's this energy. It's like, oh, it's really scary. I don't really want to go up there and look at that because it's really can I swear on your show?
Yes, you can swear.
Okay, it's really fucking deep and it's painful and it's horrible, right? So I don't want to go there. And there's this anxiety about going into the depth of that pain, because can I hold myself in the depth of that pain? Am I enough to go there on my own? Can I hold everything that energy is? Because it's big and it's messy and it's scary and it's horrid. And really what I like to create for women, my clients, and what I've had created for me in a lot of ways, and through like asking for what I need and honing in on what I actually need, is I've been able to create this space where I'm like, okay, I'm coming closer to that energy. I'm coming closer to the depth of that pain. All right, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to go around the outside. I'm going to go around the outside. Okay, now I'm going to be with that energy, and I'm going to go into the depths of that energy, and I'm going to relive that in a safe container and feel all of those uncomfortable feelings that I felt. And when you get to the crux of this energy, often what it feels like is like, oh, as you're getting closer, it's like, if I get in there, am I just going to be that way forever? Am I going to be in that pain forever if I start like looking at it, right? And when you get into that pain, you realize the energy just dissipates because you've actually confronted it. It's the same with any fear in life, right? When we always have those big hurdles in life that we think that I'm never going to be able to be a public speaker or whatever the fear is, that one thing that you can't face. You get there and you're like, oh, I don't even know why I was so worried. I don't even know, like, what was it, what was the feelings of that? And once you like let out that sort of that scream, that pain, it just dissipates. It's just the anxiety of looking at it and whether you're going to be held when you're in it. Like, because like sometimes we do need someone to hold our hand through that. And that's kind of where I was talking about in the last interview we had together, about how women don't feel safe in their sexuality. Their sexuality is so huge. It literally creates life. And, being in that energy on your own can be really confronting, which is why a lot of women have like blocks against masturbation, because it's like the biggest life force energy that we have in the planet. And yeah, so being on that on your own is quite confronting. So when you have your sisters around you, or if you ask someone to go through that with you and take you to that space and facilitate that space for you, which is what I do for women, is actually a lot less confronting than you think.
Yeah. It's my teacher had said that it's you remind me a lot of my teacher right now, actually, in how you were saying those things. And it is very true. It's as if you're in a dark room, you're in bed or whatever, and you look in the corner and you see this shadow there, and you're like, what is that? And then the more you think about it, you try to avoid it, the more powerful that thing becomes, until eventually you turn on the lights and you realize, oh, it's just a towel hanging up on the back of the door that I forgot was hanging there. And as soon as you turn the lights on, as soon as you look at it, it loses all this power, simply because you've been able to be with it and you've actually looked at it. And it's usually the anxiety, like you mentioned, it's usually the anxiety of it. I have to admit that there's. I was talking to my mom before I came on this call with you, because I was really curious about her perspective about rape and maybe some questions that I could ask you. And she had said that every woman has experienced some kind of assault or rape. Every woman, and I believe that. And she had said that she told me of a story of one particular situation that happened to her, and she said that when you're in that particular type of situation, you don't really think of screaming, because there's a lot of embarrassment. First of all, you're shocked. And then you're dealing with a lot of embarrassment. And you don't want to draw more attention to yourself because you're already humiliated. So the things that are going through your head are, how can I get out of here without drawing attention to myself and without making it worse? But then by that point, it's almost like it's too far gone, or you might be able to pull yourself out of it, but there's a lot of humiliation that goes into it. So I'm curious if you ever dealt with any humiliation from those experiences, and did you essentially just do the same thing with the integration and feeling humiliated? I felt that it's when I've done my own inner work in this regard, because we've both done a lot of shadow work, and this is shadow work that we're talking about right now. Pardon me. And I've found that going into humiliation has probably been one of the hardest emotions for me to deal with. How what did you experience humiliation? Did you experience embarrassment? And what did you do to move through them?
Definitely. I think one of the things that I had with the partner rape really was around a lot of humiliation, because I stayed with that partner for a very long time, and I allowed these things, like I minimized these things to live with it myself, like I'm talking about all this integration now and all these other things I've done. This has been in the last few years. There was a big time of my life where I was just completely minimizing all my stuff. And there were other times when I was completely victimizing myself. Like I went through all of the throes of those emotions before coming around to the idea that maybe they needed to be integrated, basically. So definitely the humiliation part of it is really hard, because I've always considered myself to be a strong woman. And I think that a lot of what my family and friends think of me is that I'm a strong woman. So admitting that that's a part of me that would accept that and did accept that is really, really difficult, because no one really knows that side of me. No one really could have understood that side of me, because it's not a side of myself that I really show anyone. And I find justifications of why I stayed in that relationship, but the main reason I stayed is for love, really. And that really shows a part of my soul that really was just desperate to be loved. And that is quite humiliating in some ways, but not so much anymore. But at the time it was.
Yeah, that's a real mind fuck. And I think a lot of people say, people who haven't done any kind of emotional integration say, why would you stay there? Well, it can be. It's emotionally chaotic, because you are in love with this person, and they really, really hurt you. They humiliated you. You want to say fuck them. You want to leave, but there's also love. I think that you're probably the type of person now that you would handle the situation much differently. But I guess considering that was probably the first time that had happened to you, you didn't really know how to handle it, because it was a very new experience. Yeah. Did out of curiosity, did you ever report these? Did you ever report these guys?
I didn't. So the one time that it happened with the stranger was in Cambodia. So it was a bit of a difficult situation with the language barrier and things like that. And the second one was with a partner in Australia, and it was just, there was so much messy, there's a big story around that, actually, to be honest. It was that partner actually did agree to putting it on record that they had done that for me, to me.
They agreed to that?
Yeah, but then we decided it wasn't for the best.
Okay, so, you gotta tell me the story here. I mean, okay, that seems much. Okay, yeah. How did that conversation come up?
Yeah.
How did it all go? Yeah.
I'm trying to protect the person, actually, which is interesting. So, yeah, for legal reasons, and for me to be staying in the country, it was something that we discussed, that this had come up between us, and that there was some mental health basically involved with why that had happened, and we were going to put it on record to increase my chances of staying in the country, basically. Not increase my chances, but just honor that that's a part of what was happening for me at that time, and that's why I could no longer be in that relationship.
Oh, so you brought it up to that partner saying, hey, you did this, this happened. We
ended on it. Yeah, we ended it, and he knew that he'd done that, and we used that word, and he'd admitted that this is something that had come up for him before in past relationships, where he had raped another spouse. And it's this is another part of it as well, the way that we confronted that together. I don't have there's a lot of mixed emotions towards that person in my life, in a way. Not so much anymore, it doesn't really come up that much, but if I'm revisiting it now, there's a lot of mixed emotions about the kind of person that he was. He did suffer with mental illness and addictions. And part of his addictive nature was this predator energy. A lot of this predator energy comes from being oppressed in society, which I think is happening for a lot of men and women, to be honest, which actually brings out this nature, like you spoke about in the gay club that you worked in. You felt like you were being penetrated when it's because this predator energy is so strong, and it's wanting to take down its kill. And it's just from oppression from society, and that people not having their sexuality, not being able to talk about sexuality, everything being taboo. So it just brings up this part of our nature. It is human nature after all. There's nothing inherently bad in what we have. It's just if we can find containers to express all the emotions that we're feeling.
Yeah, as you're saying, I'm assuming this is also what you're saying, that even for the predators, it would actually, a lot of the shadow work could probably be very good to be able to sit with that predator type energy and actually look at it and not necessarily react to it.
Yeah.
Right?
This is actually some of the work that I do with men.
Yeah, you know what? and in some of the workshops that I've done as well, like that's very, very hard for a lot of guys to do. And, it actually changed my relationships. Like I'll be very upfront here that and I've mentioned this on the show before too, that when I was younger, I used to hate women. And there was definitely animosity. I never raped anyone. That I like when I go through all the women that I've slept with. I don't think I did. But there was definitely for, I'd say, about a 4-year period where I just got angrier and angrier at women. And it wasn't until I recognized that anger and a desire to hurt women. I actually had a desire to hurt women. And there was actually a phase when I was watching porn that was actually very hurtful to women. And when I realized that, I was like, oh my God, this is why. There's an anger in here. And once I recognized that anger and a desire to hurt, a desire to be predatory, that my relationships completely switched. And obviously there was still some anger towards women. And like, I'll admit, like there's definitely times when I'm still like angry with women. Like, you're nuts. You're fucking crazy. Why are you like, fuck you, God, you know, the emotions still come up, but I've been able to, you know, integrate it and actually recognize it and then sit with it and not live from that place. Cause I'm able to see it, for what it really is. And, yeah. And once I actually did that work, I noticed it was about a year or 2 years later when I really started to dive into a lot of the personal growth work. I remembered there was this one particular night I'd been drinking, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that porn, like that video, like that really turned me on at that time, and it was it was very aggressive and it was hurtful. It was quite hurtful. So I turned on that video and I started watching. I'm like, oh God, I liked this. And I had to turn it off. I couldn't masturbate that night. I couldn't, because I was like, oh my God, like it was kind of eye opening. I was like, wow, I was a little fucked up. So yeah, God, I mean, this work of integration is incredibly powerful. So what would you say to women who were really angry with these men? I mean, I think that the anger is justified. I mean, at what point does the anger become unhealthy? Because the anger is healthy, but at what point does it start to become unhealthy?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of what I heard you say in that was a little bit alarming for me was that you said this part of you was fucked up, right? I don't actually think it was a little bit fucked up, really. I think it's it's human nature.
Verbiage. It's the verbiage, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm saying what the thoughts were that I had at the time, right? Yeah, I was like, wow, I was a little fucked up. I'm sharing the thoughts that I had.
So yeah, like we often have those sorts of like, I'm a little fucked up and all these sort of things, right? But there's actually like, you know, a lot of women in the world a lot of my clients actually that come to me and say, you know, I want to be the prey, you know, I want that predator energy from men. I want that manly, like masculine predator, like hunt energy in my sex life. I want to be choked. I want to be hit. I want all these different things. And like, this is just like, what I'm saying is that all this stuff is totally fine. And it's not necessarily like, we don't have to attach stories to it of like, oh, that's fucked up, or this is like, you know, what am I living out and all that kind of stuff. But what I do find of what women want, because I guess this isn't really a message to the men that feel this predator energy, is like what these women want, that want all of that, you know, aggressive nature in their sex life, is that they don't just want to be seen as the prey. They want to be seen as the prey, but also the precious treasure. You know, they want to be taken down as in the hunt, and play that game out and live it out to its full expression and feel all of that energy. But they also want to be seen for all the other parts of their personality, the independent woman, the child, the sacred parent, all those other parts of their personality. They want to be seen as a totality rather than just that part. And this is where it seems to go wrong in sex for most people, is that these, like, you know, this whole predator energy, I'm not going to put a man or a woman label on it, but man or woman becomes the predator, and then man or woman becomes the prey, and this predator energy just like takes so much from the prey that they're not really seeing, like, because it's almost a bit out of shame. It's like, right, I'm just going to act on that, and then I'm not going to look at that again because I can't deal with everything else that goes on around that. Whereas what I'm finding is with like conscious sexuality is that if you can own that predator energy inside of yourself, take from that prey, and then hold that person in every other part of it, and also get them to gain their own independence and like own awareness around it, it can be a really healthy way to live out these parts of our nature.
Yeah, there is so much conversation that needs to go into that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a friend, an old friend of mine. She has a rape fantasy, and she's one of quite a few women that I've met that have that. And I asked her, well, what if you were raped? Like, what would you think of that? And she said, I would actually I would like it. I would like it. I was like, well, would you report the guy to the police? She said, oh God, yeah. He'd end up doing that to someone else and probably really hurt someone, but I'd like it. Like, yeah. Like, oh my God.
Awesome.
This is when I was very new to learning about this stuff. I'm like, what? Yeah. That's nuts. And then now I understand it a lot better, but at the time I was like, it's fucking nuts. Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I've kind of skipped over your question. So your question was really around the anger, right? So how can women deal with this anger towards men? And I think it's a lot about creating this container around the anger and viewing the anger for what it is, right? So like for me, you know, how productive really is it to hate on a whole gender because of something someone's done to you, right? It's like everybody, and, you know, a lot of people, I hear a lot of women saying, oh, it's just how men are, you know, it's just men. And I hate that because it's so upsetting to like throw that into that space and just assume that that's what all men are going to be like. And it also creates this really bad belief and story, which can actually end up having it happen again and again and again if we have that belief around men. We can have a belief around energy. Like, you know, there's a belief around this predator energy that can be quite dangerous, and that's relevant. Predator energy is dangerous if it's not handled well, because it's a massive energy, like sadness and anger and fear and all those things. Predator energy is huge, and it's about honoring like that energy and just seeing it for what it is, and seeing that it's like how I explained last time about how anger can be unconscious. It can be projection and, you know, aggressive and violent. Whereas you bring anger into consciousness, it can be like passion and drive and ambition and a lot of great things. And predator energy is the same. You can have it in unconsciousness, which can be very taking energy, very unconsensual, and quite negative in a lot of ways. And it can be really quite traumatizing for people. Or you can bring that predator energy into the consciousness, and you can really just be with that, like be with everything that your predator energy can do. Like it can be a really useful thing to hunt and take down what you need in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and it's just about honoring that, really. It's about honoring that part of it. And so for women that are angry about this energy, it's like seeing the bigger picture for one, seeing that it's like that you can't change people in how they are going to act it out. And that's their karmic path. And also just integrating with that part of yourself. So I guess it like moving that energy, finding a practitioner that can take you into that energy and that hate, owning that hate. If you need to own that hate for men, then do that. Like, and just accept it in that moment, but don't carry that story into everyday life. Like in that moment, create a container. Okay, like it's like almost like set a timer on your phone, or say, like, in this room, this is where I'm gonna like hate men. You know, and when you're in that room, you can really like go to town. You can, you know, you can do art with it. You know, you could really like cut things up. You can do whatever it takes to like get that energy like traveling through your body.
Done exercises like that it's powerful.
Yeah, it's like screaming and crying and allowing yourself to be in that hate and saying it and like shouting it, whatever it takes to have it be honored.
So how did you end up turning this stuff into a power then? So when you integrate it, so it's one thing to be integrated. How have you turned these experiences into a power?
Yeah, I think it's about bringing it into consciousness again. Like, you know, if I bring that, I have the predator energy inside me. I also have the victim prey energy inside me as well. And as I accept myself as a very complex being, then I can see that that all of these parts really play into my power. Like if I didn't have one of them, then I couldn't do like there's a lot of things that I can do with all these different energies, and I can channel these energies at any one time. And that makes me a very powerful being in a lot of ways.
It's also very true that we recognize in others what we know in ourselves. So that's actually why a lot of gullible people are some of the most trustworthy, because they just generally trust the world, because that's just how they would treat people, right? So I mean, if you find yourself to be a very nice and kind person, to protect yourself, it could actually be a very powerful practice to find the predator energy that lives within you somewhere. And that would actually enable you to be able to recognize predators healthily outside of you and in the world. I think what I have noticed is sometimes people get so caught up in their own fear of their own predator energy that they start looking around and finding predators everywhere. Of course, because they're either living in their anger or they're so scared of their own predator energy that they try to be a good person, and they can pick out the bad people. It's like, well, if you're going to find the bad people, everyone is a bad person. Every single person out there is a bad person as much as they are a good person. So it's it really is about that. Again, come back to that word, integration.
I think the only thing that separates those things is about the people that have a lot of awareness around the different energies that are inside of them versus the people that are completely unconscious and are just letting their predator energy or whatever it is drive the car, basically.
I've got a few other questions here for you. What does, when we were talking about this before, that what does minimizing look like? Because you had mentioned that you went through a phase of when you're minimizing it, and then there was also a phase when you're living as a victim. I think we can understand what it means to live as a victim, but maybe can you give an example of what it was that you were saying, both in your narrative, in your mind, and also, and also as you were talking, what was the narrative when you were playing the victim? It's the first question. Then what's the narrative when you're minimizing the experiences?
Okay. Well, when the narrative of the victim is very much like getting caught up in the emotion and attaching that to my identity, basically. Like, oh, I'm a depressed person. I'm a victim. I'm,
ashamed.
There's a lot of, ashamed, and like this living in that. And, you'd be surprised at how much you wear that in your energy before you even speak. People can see it on you. And often that actually sometimes ends up increasing the chances of, things like that happening again in a way, because people, like, what happens?
The predators want to find victims.
Exactly, right. And I do really believe in that. Like, you can expand your energy outwards to be bigger, and I know I've done it when I have been like walking along a street at nighttime, when I'm thinking, oh God, like this is a bit dangerous, I'm on my own or whatever. I'll almost like envision myself like being bigger than I actually am. And I, like, if I'm about to pass somebody walking the other way, then I might bring my shoulders back and like make myself bigger to show that I'm not, that's what people do, right? This is how we protect ourselves. It's like, comes from like the animal kingdom. I feel like it's not that different. But yeah, so and also with the other energy, the minimizing energy, it's really around like just not acknowledging it, almost disassociating from any emotion. So like, oh no, I'm fine. Like there's nothing's wrong. It wasn't that bad. And it's not as bad as what happens to people in this country or what happens to women over here. And, my friend had this way worse experience. So I don't really want to talk about my experience because it will take away from the pain of others. This is like a crazy idea that we have.
So the minimizing is a comparison.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Okay. All right. I think.
Sometimes it's just not acknowledging it at all. It's being completely dissociated.
Okay. Or saying that, there was nothing wrong. That's just stuff that happens.
Yeah.
Rather than also saying, that happens, but it's really unhealthy.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's those two. And I think a lot of the conversation that we've had so far has been talking about primarily the victims, or the people who have been raped or assaulted. And I've encountered dialogue online where, and sometimes in person, but I tend to run in crowds that have conversations like you and I are having right now. So generally people who've done a fair amount of capital W work. Yeah. And some of the dialogue that I've seen is there would be a reframe or a distortion of what it is that we're talking about and making it sound as though we're blaming the victim. As in, get your life together, get your shit sorted, stop feeling like a victim, blah, 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 blah. Maybe we should just teach boys not to rape in the first place, blah, 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 blah. And I'd like to hear your take on that.
I guess in an ideal world, yes, it would be great if we could teach people to deal with their predator energy and all these different parts of ourselves before we get to this state. But that's not where we're at today, and I'm pretty much into living with what's happening in the present moment. So that's where I'm going to address it from.
I would drop the mic, but it's expensive, and that would not be pleasant for the listeners. So I'll just leave it right here.
Okay. So I just think that really we can talk about like prevention, and I do understand why like it can be really like upsetting for people if they say like, you know, we should get women to not wear short skirts, and we should get women to, you know, go and take self-defense lessons so they can defend themselves in this big bad world. And one part of it that might be just dealing with it at the present moment, and then there's the other part of it, it's like, cool, let's educate people and let's get people comfortable with what's actually going on in their bodies and like why they're wanting to do this, and also not making it like if you came to me and said, hey, I've got this fantasy about raping a bunch of women, right? It's about me not making you the a bad person for that. It's about just saying, cool, let's honor that part of your energy that's in you right now. Energy might not have been in you yesterday, it might not be in you tomorrow, but right now it's there. Let's deal with it. And also getting comfortable with what's going to happen when that energy does come up for you. Like there's always uncomfortable energy in our bodies, like at some point in our life. Like you cannot go through life without experiencing that. So how about we teach people to get comfortable with those energies and say like there is no right and wrong. There's just ways that we can consciously deal with what energy is in our body, and there's ways that we can unconsciously deal with it. Because everybody knows, like I'm not going to say everybody, but like most people know that have raped someone, that what they did was a bit shady, and a lot of them like block it out, you know, that they think, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. That person could have got hurt by doing that, right? But there's not anybody on the planet that hasn't done something that could have hurt another person because they've been selfish. Because selfish is also a part of like energy that's in our body, you know, and that shifts as well. Like all these things are moving, is what I'm saying. So just because I meet a man who has raped a woman, it does not in my mind write him off as a bad person that, you know, is, you know, completely wrong, and he's just going to be a bad person for the rest of his life because he's done that. Doesn't matter what his opinions are on it, to be honest. It's like whether he thinks he did something right or whether he did something wrong, or whether there's a grey area for him. Whatever it is, it's just the energy that was in him at that time. I'm trying to get back to the question. The question
you know what? I like even just going down that route. We can always come back to the question, but you're saying right there. I mean, I don't know personally. I mean, the whole Aziz Ansari thing. I think it's a little ridiculous how his reputation is being completely. That's what I think. I think it's a little excessive, and I don't think he needs to be punished to the degree that he's being punished. I'm not sure if you've heard of the whole Aziz Ansari thing. Basically, went on a date with a woman. They went down on each other. She left. He thought that everything was fine. He texted her the next day saying, "Hey, thanks for coming. That was a great time." And then she said, "Hey, I didn't actually feel all that comfortable, and that didn't feel right." And then he started apologizing, and then it got it. And then she basically started saying that she was raped or sexually assaulted or something to that effect. But and you see this on celebrities who, you know, 10 years down the road, they have people who are coming out and saying that they were raped. Now, I think there was the one producer, Harvey Weinstein. That guy sounds like he needs some serious help. He's a serial rapist. Like, that guy needs to go to jail, like, straight up.
Yeah.
He needs to go to jail. Like, yeah. And then I think there was the other Olympics, a coach for the Olympics who was molesting the girls on the Olympic gymnastics team, and I'm grateful that he's in jail, for the rest of his days. I mean, these people need to go to jail. So I guess where it just seems like there's a severity where there are people that are serial rapists, where this is what they do. They are stuck in this predator energy, and they're predators. And then there are people who, like you just said, were in that energy, and they did something that was shady, or just flat out rape, and you wouldn't necessarily look at them as though they're a bad person. How would you go about addressing them or addressing this? I mean, this is a very challenging conversation right here, but it's something that I think that we need to talk about, because
okay, well, I guess really what I'm saying, I just want to be clear that I do believe that people should go to jail if they do something wrong, right? So even if it's just a one-off, and if that were, if everything's cleared in the court, they should go to prison. But what I'm hoping for in prison is that they have the time to reflect, to integrate that, because there is such thing as like people that just like, I'm not going to integrate it, I'm not going to deal with it, I'm just going to like dissociate it, I'm going to move on, I'm going to change countries, and I'm going to pretend that never happened, right?
Okay.
That's not healthy, because then it will happen again.
Okay.
But what I guess I'm hopeful for is that these people go to prison and then they learn things that help them integrate, and then they move, maybe they can integrate back into society and then be a good person and learn from what they've done, and maybe take that message that's happened to them and inspire others to like grow and get in touch with their shadow. There's my
100%.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, of course, hopefully that's the point of prison. But from people that I speak to that have been put away in prison for rape, actually that's not what's happening in there. So there is a lot of things that aren't going, like, it's just this idea in our society that there's like right and wrong, and that person's a rapist now, so they're going to be a rapist for the rest of their life, and we're just going to write them off, and they're not going to be part of society, when there's so much gray area to what's going on.
So I guess you're more concerned. The way where you're coming from is you're more concerned with the rehabilitation of that individual. Is that basically it? Like if it was a one-off, they go to jail until they're in some way rehabilitated, or do you put them in jail? I'm curious, because I really don't know. Or do you put them in jail for the rest of their life to constantly look at what it is that they did? Or where would you draw the line? I mean, this is sort of like I really have no idea. No idea, and
I'm just smiling because I feel like I'm the Prime Minister and I'm going to have all the answers right now. And I'm like, I'm not really sure what's the right way to deal with these things. Yeah. I'm not going to pretend like I know. But I guess like there is just a gray area of like where, some people, we can never prove that like that part of the predator energy is integrated. So, you've got people that go to prison for rape or whatever for like, 3 years or something, let's say. Mm-hmm. They go to prison for 3 years. Nothing's actually helping them in prison to get integrated. And like some people that go to prison for those 3 years, they do get integrated because they've got this awareness that they are able to develop on their own, and they start to think about mindfulness and they start to learn it. But then there's other people who go to prison for the same 3 years for rape, and they don't integrate anything that happens at all. They just get by every single day. They don't learn anything. They don't create any awareness. And then they're back in the public. And then these women that have been raped, or that, maybe they're back living in the same town, and they're like scared to go out because they know that person's now out of prison living in the same town as them. So it's just so messy and so like uncomfortable. for everybody involved. So I guess I don't want to be like the know all of the answers, because I don't know what's right for people, and I don't know what is the right way to deal with these things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wanted to bring up this conversation because I do see sort of a severity, like the people like the Harvey Weinsteins who need to go to jail for a very, 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 very long time. Right. Yeah. I would think that it'd be best if they stay there for the rest of their life. I do. Okay. But then also the people who were drunk and stupid and got into this predator energy, and they do need, I think they do need to go to jail to a certain degree. But I was curious. Yeah, I was just curious to hear your perspective, because I don't really know how to do that. But I'm more concerned as well about, I mean, there definitely needs to be punishment for actions. You need to, I guess, in a way, atone for your sins. But I think that there also needs to be a huge emphasis on rehabilitation. And I think a lot of the discourse is about punishment rather than rehabilitation. And having a discussion around severity can
minimize someone's experience.
Exactly. And that's not really the intent behind it. Because the person who experienced it, it's very, very, very powerful for that person. It's just as powerful as the next person. So it's not about minimizing that person's experience. Yeah. It's about trying to look at a larger picture. And that's a very uncomfortable conversation to have. But I think if we're to live from a place of compassion, I think it's also important to be able to, to have, conversations like this around it.
Yeah.
So I guess the question before then, to tie back to that question, sorry, did you have anything else to say about that?
No, I think, I don't know, there's a lot we could go into, but I think that's enough on that.
Yeah, okay, all right.
For me.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So the question that I had asked was that you started to go down, it was basically the conversation around people of like, let's just teach boys to not rape. And then also the victim blaming. And so that was sort of the conversation. That was the question, was asking about those two things. And you started to go down the path of saying, it'd be great to have a world where no one ever gets hurt, but then, that's just not life. Life in a lot of ways is suffering, and it's about learning how to handle that suffering. That's the way that I see it. So I guess that was kind of the direction. Do you remember where you're going with it?
So I guess really what I think is that, like, this comes back to sex education, like, which is not like dense enough in our society at all for young children. It's like if we knew that we were going to have to come into contact with these energies within inside of us, neediness, like predator, like whatever the uncomfortable jealousy or whatever these uncomfortable emotions are, then we might be a little bit more prepared, and a little bit more like we might be able to feel like we can seek attention if we're feeling these emotions, rather than just like we just go into life and no one tells you they're coming, and then they hit everybody when they're drinking or when they're just coming into their teenage years, and then everyone's like, oh, we never saw this coming. It's like, well, we all knew this was going to happen. So like, why don't we do something about it before it starts happening? That's what I think. So like addressing it as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what else? I had a few other things that there was a question that my mom had asked, but I think that we already, there's actually two here. The one I think we've already touched on, but the one was how can some women take an experience like that, like what you've gone through, and then come out stronger, yet others become a victim and constantly blame the world. But I think we've actually already talked about that at a fair amount, so I think I'll move past that one. And she also mentioned that in a lot of ways some women will and men as well. A lot of the younger generations, she was saying, seem to wear their victimhood like a badge of honor. And I'm curious if that resonates at all to you, and if you wanted to talk about that at all. If not, then we can move past it. Does that make any sense to you?
It doesn't really resonate with me.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll move past it because we, like, my mom and I, we were having a conversation about a bunch of other stuff, so that had come up. I guess I still don't feel complete with the topic around victim blaming.
Yeah.
So here's another wording that bringing up my mom a lot today. She had mentioned is being a victim a form of escapism. So basically not taking responsibility for your life and using your victim experience as an excuse to not finding success or living a happy life. I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Yeah,
it's very heavy.
it is very heavy. It is very heavy. As a little aside, when I was growing up, my parents and I, and my brother when he lived with us, we would sit around the table and we would have philosophical conversations. So beautiful. These types of questions aren't new to me.
Yeah, cool. So I think that there's so much at play in that, and the word privilege keeps popping up in my mind. Like, to be honest, a lot of the things that happened to me, I was on the other side of the world and away from my family and my support network. But my support work is so strong and so loving that honestly, even though I live on the other side of the world still and don't have any of them close to me, I still feel that energy in my psyche, because I've grown up with all these strong role models, like my mom and my dad and my brother and my friends and my grandparents and everybody have just instilled this strength into me from a young age, and they've just been so stable that I am now, that might be a big part, well, it is a big part of why I've been able to get past a lot of things that have happened to me. Whereas if I had a background of having, abuse and my parents weren't there for me or whatever it was, that's going to completely change how I go about dealing with this stuff and the coping mechanisms that I have, right? So a lot of things that might happen to me may affect somebody completely different, but I have been very privileged to have the upbringing that I've had. And that, to me, is why I probably am a big part of it. So there's a big part of privilege in why people get affected more than others. And, I have been taught that if something bad happens to me, to reach out and ask for help. I don't know who installed that in me, but it's been something that's been coming up, and I'm realizing that. And part of it has been, I've also had the strength to kind of teach myself this sort of stuff as well. This is partly why, I want to use what I have got to help others, because I want people to know that it is okay to reach out and ask for help. I think that kind of covers it, really. So it's really about not everybody's had that kind of upbringing where they think it is acceptable to ask for what they need, and that they'll even receive it if they did ask for what they need.
Oh, that's a big one. That's a huge one. That was a great answer.
Okay, thanks.
Wow. And yeah, you know what? I think that's pretty much, that's everything that I've got at this point. We covered a lot in this conversation.
We did.
We covered a lot. Yeah. Is there anything that you think has been left unsaid, or anything else that you wanted to say that maybe I didn't ask a question that guided us down that particular direction?
I guess there's one thing that I'm thinking, if I'm a listener and I'm going through any of this stuff, and I'm hearing you and I say everything we're saying, we talked a lot about doing the work and, getting integrated and moving the energy in your body and all that kind of stuff. I guess there's like a big piece around what that looks like. And I think I did cover it a little bit by saying like create the container and all that kind of stuff. Like I think ritual is really helpful. I think asking somebody to sit in it with you, and that person doesn't need to know what to do. They don't need to necessarily be a facilitator, but like if you have someone that you can trust and that you see as like a strong person in your life, then just ask them to sit in that space with you and just allow whatever comes up to come up. So say like I might just scream in this session. I might just say I hate a bunch of people, and maybe if you can just sit there and hold space for all my emotions, that'd be amazing. So like if you do have that person, if not, there is like spaces where you can, like if you go to your doctor, there you can usually get counselling and ask for that kind of space to be held for you by a counsellor, which in most countries I'm hoping it's free. So what I'm saying is that there's always a way to like start dealing with this stuff, and like the sooner you can confront it, the sooner that you can get integrated with it.
Amazing. All right. Well, I think we can tie it up from there. How can people reach you? Do you do this kind of coaching online?
Yeah, so I do Skype sessions. So I do hold space for people via that as well. But I'm based in the Gold Coast in Australia, and I do what I've mentioned. I work with men and women doing this kind of stuff, and I also work with couples. You can reach me at tantricwitch.com. It's probably the best place to find me. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and you can find all that through the website.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Vicky, for coming back on the show to talk about a pretty hot topic. And thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome. Pretty amazing. And thanks for letting me ask some uncomfortable questions as well.
Cool. Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you.